A side, B side, what side are you on?
And welcome back to another episode of A Side, B Side podcast. What's going on, Adam?
Not too much. How are you, Brooke?
I'm great. So I'm in the new digs finally. It's, you know what? It was only
finally? It's been like 10 days.
I know, that's what I was about to say. I know it's only been we were in the hotel for 2 weeks. So literally been here 2.5 weeks, right? And I'm saying finally, like we've been here like 4 years. But I
finally unpacked one of my last boxes and I've been in for 13 months. That's a finally.
Well, I just said to my daughter last night, I said, we've only been here 4 days, but it feels like it's been a month already. Like in the apartment, we've been here 4 days. And I was like, but it feels like it's been a month already. And she's like, I know. And we've literally been here for 2.5 weeks because it's, of course, as soon as I got here, I started working. So,
because who needs the transition time? Whatever. I mean, let's just damn the torpedoes straight on till morning. Let's go.
So can I tell you, I am so super excited. Of course, I came here for a new job and it's been amazing. Everybody's been wonderful. Like I'm so super happy, everything that, I was promised when they were like, hey, we want you to come here for this, everything's come through. So, which is always great. Because, sometimes employers will promise you things and then they'll be like, oh, did you really think that was going to happen? And, no, everything's been amazing. And
it's kind of like dating. Like, oh, you thought I was actually 6 feet tall?
Right. No.
No.
So New Kids on the Block, I got to do like the big New Kids on the Block tour announcement the other day, which I am a huge blockhead, have been forever, have been to several concerts. I've loved New Kids since, when I was young. And of course, they're doing a tour and they're actually going to be coming here to Lincoln in June. And I just found out that I may be doing an interview with one of the New Kids on the Block. And I'm like trying to maintain my composure, but at the same time, I'm screaming on the inside.
Can you hint at which one it might be? Or is that all like still to be determined under wraps? Who's feeling the most sober that morning?
No, actually, it would be the youngest member of the group, Sir McIntyre.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Blue Eyes himself.
That I can almost name all of them.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, so we got Donnie, Jordan. Oh, now I'm blanking. I got two out of 5. That's real bad.
Joey, Danny,
John. Joey, Danny, John, who was the tall brunette guy, and then Jordan.
You said Jordan. You've named them all now.
Have I?
Yeah. Because the first two you said were Donnie and Jordan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, man. So yeah, you got Donnie, Danny, Jordan, John, Joey.
It was such a it was a back to the Future.
Don't you dare.
Don't I?
New Kids on the Block.
New Kids on the Block.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a big deal when I was in grade school, but it was more a big deal for like my surrogate big brother, who was in 5th grade when I was in 2nd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And because it was like a big deal that his name was Joe as well. And then he was a 49ers fan, and Joey in some like Teen Beat magazine also wore a 49ers jacket, and so like all the girls were comparing the two, and so I remember that was like how it mattered to me that Joe was like Joey, and the girls thought that Joe was pretty cool already, and now he was even cooler because he was like Joey, and that's the only part of it I understood as a 2nd grader.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't hear the music.
Oh, I knew. I mean, like, know all the songs. Probably still to this day. Have been, like I said, to several shows. I've taken my youngest with me. And she is now an official blockhead. So yeah, I'm super, super excited. I don't typically, I'm just like, whatever, it's just another interview. But now I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. On the inside, but on the outside, I'll be like, hey, Thanks for doing the interview there, buddy.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, we do a lot of these interviews. I just wanted you to know it's not that big a deal.
You're just another interview for me, guy.
They do put on a really good show. I worked at concessions at a New Kids on the Block Backstreet Boys concert like 10 years ago on a tour. And it was we got paid a percentage of sales, and it was a very good night because the ladies were spending a lot of money on t-shirts and hoodies and, you know, stickers and all the stuff. So it was a very good show.
Here's the thing with them. So their fans, most of them, unless they, you know, are fans like me and have brought their kids along, are fans from when they were teen girls, and now they're grown women and these are grown men. So, you know, they're going to the show, they're drinking, and these grown men are taking, like Donnie likes to take off his shirt. Donnie's pretty buff, you know, so yeah, they're getting drunk and they're seeing their teen idols who are still, you know, still looking good. And of course they're going to go shelling out the dollars.
And there were a lot of mom-daughter combinations because it was New Kids on the Block and Backstreet Boys. So there was like this overlap. So it was definitely a lot of families there together. But so this is one of those serendipitous moments that happen sometimes where you mention something that just happens to tie in with the A side, or the, you know, like you say something in the B side that starts with the A side, but this is actually ties in really, really well to one of the people from the A side today. So I have a trivia question that is about New Kids on the Block that I was already going to ask you.
Wow.
That it now even fits even better.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. Another thing real quick. Yesterday, we got out to the movie theater here. So, you know, back in Bowling Green, I had the Regal Unlimited, which, you know, go any movie, you know, you pay $20 a month and you go see as many movies as you want. Well, they don't have that here, but on Tuesdays they do like $5 movies, and then the theater that we went to is so nice. They've got the like reclining seats, which I always think is pretty cool because we didn't have that. The leather reclining seats, and then they have a lounge that you can go into before or after the movie, and then they also have food, and you can order food and they will bring it to your seat.
To your seat?
Yeah, to your seat.
Nice.
I know. I thought that's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I used to work 20 years ago, I used to work at a cinema cafe, which was like a full-on restaurant with tables and stuff in a movie theater. And that was always an interesting adventure. But this sounds a little bit more functional. They just like bring it right to you.
Yeah. So we didn't do that yesterday. Yesterday they did like I said, it was a $5 movie, and then you got like a complimentary small bag of popcorn, which was pretty cool. And so we did that, but we plan to go back, and like they even have the gluten-free pizza, which is like what? Nice. So we're gonna go back and do the whole thing, order it, have them bring it to our seat. I'm gonna get the gluten-free, and my daughter is gonna, you know, just get regular pizza, and we're gonna live it up.
And was it seemingly like back to normal? Like you go to the concession stand and all the lines are open, and like it.
Yeah.
Or what?
Yeah, it is. And then you can still order on the app if you choose. But yeah, the concession stands are open. You know, masks, of course, you still have to wear your masks. But everything was seemingly back to normal. And I finally, she had already seen it, but I finally got to see Shang-Chi.
Oh, what'd you think?
Oh my gosh. That is one of the best Marvel movies I have seen, not just in a long time, but period, point blank. That is one of the best Marvel movies they've made.
I really, really enjoyed it. When I saw it the second time, I like saw new things that I hadn't seen the first time, and I'm excited to once it hits Disney Plus, like this month, Black Widow hits Disney Plus streaming. So I'm just gonna probably watch that like 5 times to see new things I missed with the two times I saw it in the theater. But it'll be definitely a constant watching of Shang-Chi when it gets on there.
Yeah, it was so good. And like, of course, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's great. And you know, I'm like, yeah, mom, whatever. You know how you're the same way. Somebody tells you it's going to be great because I've told you about shows and you're like, yeah, I'm going to watch it. So I was just like, yeah, okay, it's gonna be good, great.
Yeah.
Marvel is known for good movies. Whoop-de-doo. But no, this was awesome.
And it was different too. It's like just
Yes.
a lot of the same stuff, like same Marvel notes, but totally different as well, which that's always fun.
Yeah, and like, can I just tell you, the costumes and the imagery and the way it was shot is so beautiful, because I feel like finally we're staying true to cultures. And it wasn't a whitewashed version of a culture.
Yeah.
You know, you,
It wasn't Iron Fist, which I think Marvel has hopefully learned their lesson with Iron Fist. And Iron
mhm.
Fist was created in a very different era, but it's so problematic. And hopefully that it's one of those things that they'll avoid in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So besides working and catching a couple of catching that movie and unpacking
Yeah.
constantly, that's
Yeah.
been my that's been
Just
my
moving your whole life out of storage, from moving from the home of 2 weeks at the hotel to renting a place and moving all the way in. And it's like, really, what have you been doing?
I mean, gosh, can you do something with your
Uh,
life? Gee.
yeah. It's like, what have you been spending your hours on?
What'd you do this week?
I've been working, and ever since I got my HBO Go Max thing figured out, and then now have the app, I have been watching movies like crazy, just rewatching stuff. That actually led to the A side again this week. But like in the last week alone, I've rewatched all of the Die Hards, and I rewatched The Mummy, which I hadn't seen in forever. But one thing I did not notice when I remember seeing The Mummy in the theaters back in 99, 2000, whenever it came out. There's like one woman's part in the entire movie.
Really?
Like Rachel White, I mean, there may be women in background scenes, but I think she might be the only woman that has a spoken line in the entire movie.
Wow.
Which never noticed that before. I mean, maybe there might be like another, like some small extra or somebody if somebody wants to double check them all, but there are no like supporting characters that are women other than her, and she's like one of the stars. But it's just kind of not something I noticed 20 years ago, but really stood out this time. It's like, wow, this is. I mean, granted, it was it's take place in like the 1930s, but still, like, it wasn't 25 men to one woman in society. So
Right.
but that one holds up. Always a lot of fun. I've been rewatching a lot of Dwayne Johnson movies, The Rock, because I think I started one and then I just kept suggesting more and more of them. So the second, the Journey to Forbidden Island, so the second of the Jules Verne inspired movies. The first one was Journey to the Center of the Earth with Brendan Fraser as sort of the lead character, and then the second one, it goes to the Forbidden Island. It's got The Rock, and then I watched Rampage, which was not as bad as I expected for a movie based off of a video game.
Mm-hmm.
And that also will impact the A side today. Am I going first or second?
You are going first this week.
I'm going first. Excellent. Good. Because I'm excited to talk about it. And I was like, I feel like I keep previewing it, but then I'm going to have to wait. But yeah, it was based off of the old school side scroller video game where you've got these monsters that are destroying things. And it's got a giant monkey and a giant crocodile and a giant wolf. And it was actually more enjoyable than I expected. And there was, which feels really weird. Jeffrey Dean Anderson has is it Jeffrey Dean? Yeah, it's Jeffrey Dean Anderson, right? He's on.
You mean the Walking Dead, Jeffrey Dean Morgan?
Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Gosh, I was like, that's not right. Jeffrey Dean Morgan, yeah, who was on The Walking Dead, who was
Dean Anderson was MacGyver.
No, that was Richard Dean Anderson.
Richard Dean Anderson, yeah.
That's right. That's where I was combining the two, which that'd be a really interesting amalgam of a human. Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Richard Dean Anderson. I can see that working. They're both ruggedly handsome.
Right.
I can see that happening. He's in it. It just one of these like over the top characters, and you could tell he's just having like a really fun time. And so that's fun. And then that led me to another video game movie that HBO Go suggested, which led to the A side for this week.
Well, awesome. Well, I guess we need to go ahead and get you ready to jump into the A side.
All right.
Oh, hey, Adam, before we jump into the A side, I know I was like, hey, you ready to jump in? I just forgot, since we are a true crime podcast, we do need to talk about the fact that they have identified, or they truly believe they have identified, the Zodiac Killer.
Oh, really? Because I saw something trending on Twitter. I think it was either today or yesterday, and I just assumed it was everyone saying that it was Ted Cruz again, because that was like the Twitter thing for like an entire year.
Yeah, they actually believe that it was a man named Gary Francis Post, which those three names, I'm telling you, these three names.
But I feel like they only use three names when, like, I've got a middle name, you've got a middle name.
True.
Like, I feel like they would, if I was like, and this is not going to happen. So CIA that is listening to this podcast, do not worry. But if I like assassinated the president, or I was a serial killer, then they would use my middle name for some reason. But if like I was the victim of an assassination or the victim of a serial killer, they wouldn't use my middle name.
You're just Adam.
I'm just Adam Weingarten. I'd be like, okay. and I don't know why. Like, I feel like I shouldn't say my middle name, which is it's that weird thing. Like, everyone's oddly protective of their middle name, aren't we? Like, there was like the whole thing as a kid, like, could people guess your middle name?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
It's like, we're like, knowing someone's full name is going to give you power over them or something. And I guess in a way it does, because when someone uses your middle name, you know you're in trouble.
Oh, that's true. Like when I say my kids, when they were growing up, especially if I just use the middle one, like I know a lot of parents use first and middle, but if I just use the middle one, it was deep trouble.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, but three names. So Gary Francis Post.
It turns out he died in 2018. So, yeah, no justice for the crimes that he committed. But they also believe him to be responsible for a crime that he wasn't considered responsible for either. So they have linked him with another murder. He was, as the Zodiac Killer, he was connected to 5 murders, but now they're adding another murder. He was active as the Zodiac Killer, he was active between 68 and 69, but they're attributing a murder from before that, from 66, to him as well.
And then nothing since?
Apparently not. Man. Or they haven't linked anything to him, So who knows?
Yeah, maybe it was just a phase.
I don't know if serial killing is a phase, but sure. Yeah.
Yeah, probably not.
But
usually in our stories, if even if they stop, they reemerge, and that's when they get caught.
Right. He never.
If they don't get caught the first time.
He never reemerged, so we don't. I'm sure more details will surface about it, but they just released that they do feel that he is the one responsible, and they had a whole task force, and there's lots of reasons why they think it's him, but.
And in other true crime news, I don't know, this is like probably a couple days old, but Dog the Bounty Hunter is on the
Brian
Landry guy's tail. So just a matter of time before that's a TV show.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be on this.
Just a matter of time before he's caught.
Next season of Dog the Bounty Hunter.
Yeah, get a relaunch.
Yeah. But anyway, all right. Sorry. I was like we were about to jump in, and I was like, oh, wait. But okay. So now it is time for the A side.
Well, and then we did mention actors with 3 names too. So if I become a famous actor, I like Richard Dean Anderson or Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I could be Adam Dean Weingarten.
There you go.
Yeah. So actors get 3 names too. It's assassins, actors, and serial killers. You get to use all 3 names.
And Dean is really popular.
Evidently, I didn't know. I think that's gonna be my SAG name if I ever get my Screen Actor Guild card. It'll be Adam Dean Weingarten. You heard it here first.
Oh man.
All right. So for the A side today, as I mentioned, I've been watching a lot of HBO Max and going through old movies and just kind of letting the app lead me. So I'll watch one movie and it would suggest something else, and then I'll watch next movie on the suggested list. And just kind of getting into that terminal velocity where it just kind of centrifugal force just takes me away, and I watch 6 movies in one day. And Brooke, you can correct me if I'm wrong in this, but it feels like, for the most part, and we're on episode 63,
64.
64. I'm so good at math. 64. Yeah, obviously it's an even number because I'm going first. So 64. For the most part, I feel like the A side has been mostly positive. Talking about movies that we've enjoyed, talking about underrated movies, even if they weren't big hits, mostly non-negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to change today because I rewatched a movie that I had completely forgotten about, and I had seen in the theaters when it came out way back in 2008. And I remember why I completely forgot about it. And it has one of the most inexplicable, unexplained plot points that you can have in a movie ever that I remember. I do not remember any other movie that didn't even try to explain something that was so obvious and so much a part visually of the story, and then just never paid it off, never even mentioned it, never even let you know what was going on, and spent so much time developing it. So before we lead into that part of this movie, there is a trivia question that, through my research into this film, popped up that was connected with New Kids on the Block. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, New Kids on the Block, I know Brooke is a huge fan, so I'm going to ask her if she knew this, because this was new news to me. But I feel like it's probably not as big a surprise as I was. Like most people could be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So we mentioned in the opening all the members of New Kids on the Block. They were not the original members. In fact, there is one very famous person who was in New Kids on the Block, but left the band because he didn't like how squeaky clean their image and lyrics were.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know who that might be?
I knew years ago and I have forgotten.
So the movie we're going to talk about today is called Max Payne. It is based off of a series of very successful video games, and the 2008 movie stars Mark Wahlberg.
That's right. Donnie's brother. That's right.
Donnie's brother. Yes. I didn't realize, because I was in grade school at the time and wasn't really paying attention to behind the scenes of the music industry as I should have been, that Mark Wahlberg, who would go on to be Marky Mark, was actually in the New Kids on the Block, but then left, and his brother's success got him the Marky Mark contract, and they built that whole Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch just around Marky Mark.
Yes.
It was like a completely studio created, like, boy band thing. And part of the reason that he left New Kids on the Block is that he wasn't a very good singer, which would make it hard to be in a boy band if you're not a very good singer.
Well, I mean, Danny doesn't. I didn't say that. Yeah, I didn't say that.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think you can't have 2 rapping members of the New Kids on the Block. I think that would have been a bit much, but yeah. So Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch comes along, and then he becomes an actor. And along the way, he's had some really talented roles, and he is an enjoyable actor to watch. I've liked a lot of his films. Like The Italian Job is one of a movie that I have rewatched many, many times. He's great in The Departed. I mean, he hasn't really had that same level of critical success since, and he's definitely been more, action comedy.
How's your mother and them?
Exactly. The movie that gave everyone the opportunity to do bad Boston accents after they walked out of the theater. He also was originally cast in Ocean's 11,
No,
in the
I did not
Linus
know that.
role. Yeah, he was cast as Linus, who was recast as Matt Damon when he had to drop out. So I love Truth About Charlie with um, what's her name? Um,
The Truth
Tandy
About
Newton.
Charlie.
Yeah, Tandy Newton.
Okay.
It's sort of like a romantic comedy mystery spy thing. It came out in the early 2000s, kind of in that same vein of like Entrapment. Everyone is wearing very fancy clothes, and they look beautiful people being mysterious and double crosses and that sort of thing. But he hates that movie evidently.
Oh, really?
I think, yeah, he says it's his worst work. I think that interview where he said it was his worst work must have happened before the movie Max Payne. Because Max Payne, based off of a early 2000s, 2001 is the first Max Payne video game that came out, was a story about a cop whose family is murdered by drug dealers. Then he goes on a revenge spree of tracking them down and finding the people who killed his wife and child and getting revenge. And it used, which was fairly unique for the time, the idea of bullet time. It took bullet time, which was first coined in the Matrix movies, where in the action scenes, you'd get like the slow-mo and the camera would spin around and you'd see like the bullet, trails of the bullets and those sort of things. The first time that was really put into a video game. It went on to be really successfully used in like the Red Dead Redemption series, which is one of the first, one of the best first-person shooters and storylines, in my opinion. Really fun game if you've never played it. But Max Payne was a huge success. It was there was Max Payne 1, Max Payne 2, Max Payne 3, and then they're like, obviously, we're going to turn this into a movie. And a lot of video games don't automatically translate to a film story, but this one should have been really easy to do. All it is a sort of crime noir revenge, death wish, like Taken. Guy is like, I'm gonna get people that wronged my family. It's not hard to do. Like Grand Theft Auto,
like a John Wick type.
Yeah, like very much like a John Wick. And the video game, in fact, was inspired by the movies of John Woo, and the movies of John Woo have definitely inspired John Wick. It should have been super easy to translate it from video game into movie. Somehow, and this is where sometimes people overthink things, but the team that came together to make Max Payne clearly overthought themselves and made it way too complicated and tried to make a movie that was loosely based off of a very simple plot and add just really random things in there and change stuff where they didn't need to change it. The biggest issue that I have, it's a beautiful movie. It's filmed very, very, sort of
I love the poster.
Yeah, it's very artistically done. It's got that sort of new crime noir feel that we had in like the Sin City movies, but without the black and white, the unnecessary black and white. They spend a lot of time, like happens in winter in New York City, so there's a lot of cityscapes and snow coming down. It's a beautiful movie from that aspect. There are very highly choreographed action scenes, and they've really focused on a lot of they shot scenes in two different ways, like depending on the blister packs that the actors would be wearing when in a shootout, whether it be like a lot of blood or just like an impact look. And they clearly spent a lot of time on that, and those parts work. It's a pretty movie. The action sequences are pretty good. I mean, they're not anything that really broke new ground when they certainly could have, using the bullet time, which they barely used. But it's almost like after the Matrix, they didn't want to seem like they were copying the Matrix, which maybe that's why they avoided it. But they totally left the bullet time pretty much out of the movie, which was such a big part of the game and a missed opportunity. And then in the most inexplicable way, they added a plot point that they never explained and never paid off and made absolutely no sense because it came out of nowhere and wasn't in the game. So you've got a relatively decent cast. You've got Mark Wahlberg.
Relatively decent.
Yeah, I would say pretty good. I mean, Mila Kunis, who this point was 2 years after that 70s show had been done, so her movie career was just taking off. You've got character actors like Beau Bridges and Donald Logue. You've got Amuri Alasko, who's another one of those guys who always seems to play a drug dealer, and you recognize him right away. You've got Chris O'Donnell in what would pretty much prove to be his last movie role before he committed full-time to television, and has just been on NCIS Los Angeles now since 2009, so for the last 12 years since he's made a movie.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, right? That's been a bit. It also just the casting was like, hey, how many musicians / actors can we get in the movie? So you got Ludacris in the movie playing a very buttoned up internal affairs detective, and you've also got one of the last roles for Nelly Furtado before she went full-time into music. So it's just sort of a weird that you would have two primary musicians as part of the cast as well. But the film loosely takes the plot from the video game. It's got a cop who's lost his family and is out to revenge them. But one of the great things about the video game is that was explained to you in the opening of the video game. This guy lost his family. That's why he's going around killing people. It's really clear. In the movie, they decided to wait till about a third of the way through the movie before they explain that part. Well, the first third of the movie, he's just this disgraced cop who now works in the dead cases file clerk office and is sort of a jerk, and people keep getting killed around him, and no one really knows why he's being such a jerk to everyone and why he's never smiling, and he seems to be this just horrible mad person all the time. Then halfway through the movie you're like, oh, this is why. Makes a lot of sense. Why would you wait that long to show your main character's primary motivation? The video game figured it out. Show it at the beginning. Don't show it a third to halfway through the movie. Also, the entire plot, and spoiler alert, is about tracking down the drug dealers behind Max Payne's family's murder. And they are, drug dealers, but it's not, it's a fictional drug they created for the video game. And the drug itself is a minor, character. It's used in the video game, and there are, as a plot point, but it is not as obviously focused on in the movie. And in the movie, when someone takes the Valkyrie, which is the drug, the imagery is that after they take the drug, they start seeing these almost winged demons and shadows coming around them. And the first 3 murders in the movie, they make you think that a supernatural force, these winged angels, which come in, and they spend a lot of money on the graphics to create these things, have come in and mutilated these people, chopped them to bits. Content warning, my apology. And even pulled one guy off of a building, he was standing by a ledge, and the Valkyrie's claws grab onto him and yank him, and he falls off the building. Those first 3 murders, when you're watching the film, it sure looks like there's supernatural forces that are involved here. That are, we're going to have to deal with, somehow the devil's involved with this drug. We're going to have to deal with the devil. Maybe he's part of the drug corporation or something. There's something supernatural going on.
Top CEO.
Yeah, obviously, you would think that would make sense. Then it just stops. They barely talk about the demons anymore. Then the wings become about tattoos and the idea of the Valkyrie carrying people off to whether, if they died in violence, whether they would go to the good place or the bad place. And then it comes back a little bit at the end of the movie when, spoiler alert, but I'm going to spoil this entire movie because I don't want you to watch it. It is free on several different streaming platforms. Do not go find them. You can pay $3.99 if you want to watch it somewhere. Please don't do that. If you're thinking about doing that, send me $3.99 because it's the same. You'll get more enjoyment out of just seeing me buy a Coke than you would watching the movie. They do not pay it off. It comes back a little bit when at one point in a very strange superhero moment, the hero Max Payne ends up having to take the drug to fight off hypothermia, and then he becomes, in the last act of the movie, basically like this completely out of control, like unstoppable superhuman force because he's on the drug and he can track everybody down. Like he's got super, like it drives everybody else crazy. But when Max takes it, he just becomes Captain America meets the Punisher, meets the Predator. He's like completely invulnerable and he can shoot everybody. And he's like Neo at the end of the Matrix.
I mean,
obviously. So it really depends. It just, it heightens what's already in you, like the super serum in the MCU, evidently. So they never pay off the demons that you see. They never mention them. They just show these hugely expensive creative special effects creations and then just drop it. And so by the end of the movie, they're trying to tell you that, it's the bad guys are this corporation, and Chris O'Donnell and Beau Bridges and the actual villain from the video game is Nicole Horn, but she's barely in this movie. And then I think they were setting her up for the sequel as the bad guy because she gets away scot-free and is hardly in it.
Mm-hmm.
But it also reeks in the fact that like whoever was making this movie had a problem with the main villain being a woman because they completely sideline her and take like the underlings and keep pushing them up as more important. Maybe they were trying to set her up as the big bad for the second film because they clearly were trying for a sequel. They even have like an after the credits thing, which is like the world's most, like this movie is not fulfilling in any way. But then if you sit through the credits for the after the credits thing, it's the least fulfilling after the credits scene you've ever had because they don't even say anything. It's just two people sitting in a diner and someone hands each other a piece of paper. It's really I waited through all of the credits to see that was not worthwhile. It just sets up a sequel.
At least in the MCU, we get to see him eating shawarma in a restaurant.
And it's like mentioned during the film. It's like a payoff of a joke that like they said when this is all over, we should get shawarma. And then they do. It's like, right. Oh, that's perfect.
Right.
Mila Kunis is poorly used in the movie, barely used. Mark Wahlberg looks like he's having a horrible time, and he is a very charming, funny guy. He works well in action comedies. The Spencer Confidential that came out on Netflix last year.
That is really funny.
Really fun movie. I mean, the other guys he's really good in. I mean, he's a charming, engaging, sarcastic, like let him say something that's remotely engaging. The entire movie, he just basically scowls, looks like he's in a horrible mood the entire time because, well, half the movie we don't realize why he's in a horrible mood. Then when we realize why, because his family got killed, you understand a little bit more, but it is just a really dour, heavy, overly like produced with the visuals and the graphics and everything, and you don't enjoy any of it. By the time that he gets his revenge, one, it took us so long to get invested that it was in revenge that we're hardly invested as an audience anyway. And there's no uplifting feeling. It's just, there's no catharsis. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that was the guy now. I mean, the bad guy, this idea of like who's doing it, trying to figure out, you're not all that excited when the twist comes of who it's been the whole time. You don't feel any release when like the, any victory at the end. It's just kind of meh. And the entire thing is exhausting in a way. And I love movies. I go to bad movies. I am one of those people who almost feels like every movie has its time and place and its moment, and you can watch a movie that everybody else hates, but there are some movies that just do not have a time and a place. I mean, I guess if I was in danger of being too happy and I had too much energy and I was like, man, everything is going way too well, I need to be thoroughly disappointed in something, then I would watch Max Payne.
Dang.
Because the only feeling you will get at the end is complete disappointment. And then a little bit of repulsion that they thought they were going to get a sequel out of this. It did make $80 million worldwide, which it's, when we compare it to, The Shadow, which made, $32 million just 12 years earlier. It feels like a lot, but even in 2008, that was considered a pretty subpar performance. And of course, it had a big budget. Everyone got paid well. There were a lot of special effects that they didn't need, especially for the demons that they never pay off, is to explain. Like, they don't even, like, they could have just gone, oh, hey, when people take this drug, they see demons. They don't really ever even do that. They're just like, oh, yeah. And they never explain, like, at least for the first two murders, they later show that, the main drug dealer bad guy is chopping people to bits with a machete. And so, like, oh, okay, this is why, there were pieces everywhere. Well, we thought it was the demon that was ripping everybody apart. But no, it's the machete. But the guy who falls off the building, it is filmed in such a way that he is pulled off by a demon and then dropped to the ground. It wasn't like he jumped. He falls backward because he was being pulled on his shoulders. They never explain why that was. And that clearly bothers me way more than it should. So if you're looking to be thoroughly disappointed in a movie, if you'd like to wonder, have I wasted an hour and a half of my time? And why did they never just explain why that guy fell off a building when it clearly looks like he was pulled by a demon that doesn't exist? Then go check out Max Payne. Or you can send me $3.99 instead.
Or me. I just moved.
Yeah. You could just buy us a coffee. Like, if you find yourself like, I should go watch this, unless it's one of those, I'm going to watch it because it's so bad. Like, there's
I'm watching this ironically.
Yeah. But it's not even fun in an ironic way because it's just so meh and exhausting and unfulfilling. It is like a really, like, if you've ever tried to make a sandwich at home that you saw at a restaurant, you're like, oh, I could make this at home. And then you tried to make it and it was like, yeah, this is why I go to restaurants.
Yeah.
That's kind of the feeling you're going to get. The cheese isn't going to be melted right. The bread's going to be probably burnt and you're not using the right cut of meat. And you didn't even realize there was another sauce in there because that's really what tied everything together. So this is the A-side review of both Adam's Lunch and Max Payne.
But the funny thing about this whole thing to me, Adam, I have never heard you just this vehemently dislike a movie.
Yeah, I don't like, usually I can find something that I like about every movie. And yes, I think it's filmed very well. I mean, but that's wasted because they don't really do anything with it. They spent so much time on the visuals, and then like even the cityscapes and the snow, it's pretty, but like it doesn't create any emotional investment. And the choices to not give us his reasons for his revenge, or where explain what's going on in his life until a third of the way into the movie, and the whole demon angel Valkyrie vision thing, it just makes me very upset. I would say I feel,
I can't tell at all.
I know this. Usually I try to keep the A side positive and light. This is the dark side of the A side. I'm very, very disappointed, and I've got disappointed dad face on, and I just, I'm not mad. I know you can do better.
I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, but I am mad.
And you didn't even pay for this.
I'd already paid for it. Like, I had an only reason it popped up because I watched Rampage and it said other movies based off video games, and I was like, oh yeah, Max Payne. I kind of remember that. Let's see what it's about. Let's rewatch it. And I was like, now I remember why I've blocked this out of my memory.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, there you go.
Yeah. I'm sweating. I'm like,
you got so upset you worked up a sweat over that.
I worked up a sweat over my frustration with a 13-year-old movie that I didn't pay for, that just popped up, and which was one of like 15 movies I've watched in the last 7 days.
Mark Wahlberg, he's coming for you. He wants his former $3 from back in the day back.
Oh, I mean, like, and I don't even, like, I'm not even mad at Mark. It's just like, it feels like everybody in the movie was just like, what are we doing? This is kind of weird. Like, this is how bad. I rewatched this week also Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which is the second Nick Cage Ghost Rider movie. And it's not good. I mean, it's a heck of a lot better than Max Payne, but it has some serious problems. But there are redeeming parts to it. I mean, Idris Elba's in it. He's great. The gentleman from Rome, and why do I always forget his name? He was on Game of Thrones. Oh, he was in. Oh, good. So Wikipedia evidently doesn't know me very well because I type in Rome and it tells me something about a city called Rome. I don't know about that. I'm looking for the TV show. What is his name? Can add it all.
I wish I could help you on this one, but I've never watched that show. So
How is he not listed in like one of the top guys? I don't also, since I'm in like a complaining mode, do not like how IMDb has things set up now. It's
yeah,
it
it
is
looks a little
not
wonky.
conducive. It's like somebody was like, "Hey, I did some graphic design classes. Let's just put a lot of graphic design on here and make it harder to find information."
Yeah.
Kieran Hines.
Okay.
Yeah. He's in the Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, which is not a good movie. And I enjoyed that one. So I can find a bit of good in almost any movie except not Max Payne.
So what we have taken from this is go ahead, watch Max Payne if
Yeah.
you dare.
If you dare. Yeah. And if there's somebody out there who is like, no, I love that movie, please tell me why.
We need you to email us at asidebsidepodcasts@gmail.com and please tell us why you like this movie.
Yeah, because maybe there is an interpretation that I am missing completely, and I can be swayed. But gosh, I don't think so.
After all these years, I'm gonna say no.
Well, I had forgotten about it. I mean, who knows? Give me a couple of weeks, I might mentally block it out again.
That's true. And then you'll be like, oh, and then and that's what you do. Wait a couple of weeks and then you email us and tell Adam why you like this movie so that in a couple of weeks he's forgotten about it and he's like, oh yeah, maybe I'll watch that movie and give it a try now that I have these, points to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I'll be very surprised.
All right. So that's the A side.
That is the A side. I'm all vented out. Thank you for joining me in my therapy session. So.
All right. So this week for the B side. Last week we had such an incredible story about, unfortunately, a victim, but that victim has become like a legend. So we're going to switch gears again and go back to the serial killers. Mm-hmm. So this week, you may have actually heard of this serial killer. Her name, Dorothea Helen Gray. And you're like, Dorothea, maybe. Just stick with me. So Dorothea,
I'm like sitting over here, like doing the initials thing, trying to think if I could. Was it D.H. Gray? Is that a thing I know of?
No. So Dorothea was born January 9th of 1929 in Redlands, California. Her parents were Trudy May, who was a sex worker, and Trudy May Yance Gray, and then Jesse James Gray, and Jesse was a cotton picker. So Dorothea was the sixth of 7 children. Dorothea's childhood, a lot of kids. That seemed to be like the thing back then, though. A lot of kids. Yeah.
This was like pre-minivan, too.
So, did you really?
I'm just saying. How did they get those kids around?
Okay, so Dorothea, like I said, was the 6th of 7 children. She had a really rough childhood, as both of her parents were alcoholic, and she was often neglected and underfed, and she often had to scavenge for food. And of course, on top of that, there was additional trauma that she had to face in her childhood, like her father threatening suicide multiple times in front of her and her siblings, which I can't imagine having to live with that. So her father, Jesse, died from tuberculosis in 1937. His lungs were damaged as a result of a gas attack in World War I. As a result of the death of her father in 1938, her mother lost custody of all 7 children. The Gray siblings were placed in an orphanage where, unfortunately, Dorothea was sexually abused. Her mother, Trudy May, died in a motorcycle accident at the end of that same year. In 1945, at the age of 16, Dorothea escaped the orphanage and she married for the first time. So I say first because that means there's going to be a second and a third. And okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. She married a soldier, 22-year-old Fred McFall, who had just returned from the Pacific Theater of World War II. So World War II was actually fought in several different regions, and these regions were called theaters. The battles with Japan mostly occurred in the Pacific Theater, the waters and the islands of the Pacific Ocean. So Dorothea and Fred had 2 daughters between 1946 and 1948. Dorothea sent one daughter to live with family in Sacramento, and the other was given up for adoption. In late 1948, Fred left Dorothea after she suffered a miscarriage, although there are also reports that he may have died from a heart attack.
Oh.
Sometime in the spring of 1948, Dorothea was arrested for purchasing women's accessories using forged checks in Riverside, California. She was charged and she pled guilty to 2 counts of forgery. She served 6 months and then did 3 years of probation. In 1952, Dorothea marries again. This time she marries a merchant seaman named Axel Bren. Axel Bren Johnson, actually, of San Francisco. So Dorothea creates a fake identity. She starts to go by the name Tea Singola Nayarada, and she pretended to be a Muslim of Egyptian and Israeli descent. Axel and Dorothea, I can't imagine why. She's a forger and now an identity thief. They had a very troubled marriage. So because he's a seaman, of course, that means he's in the Navy out to sea a lot. Mm-hmm. Dorothea takes advantage of his frequent trips to sea by inviting other men to the home. She also gambles his money away. So she's quite the treat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So Dorothea also took advantage of the time and the men by becoming a sex worker. The marriage had been noted as being extremely unhappy and also violent at times. Yeesh. Side note, in an interview with Martin Coase of Sacktown magazine, Dorothea admitted to having twin daughters who, as young adults, both took their lives within a week of each other. She refused to disclose the name of their father, when and where they were born, and how they died, and when and where they were born, how they died, when they died, and the circumstances of how they died. So we can assume that if this is true, she didn't raise them, as she was obviously not the maternal type. She also had given up her 2 previous children, and there's no references to these 2 to be found anywhere. So Dorothea was arrested in 1960 for owning and operating a brothel under the guise of a bookkeeping company in Sacramento. She was found guilty and sentenced to 90 days in Sacramento County Jail. 90 days.
Yeah, the police caught on when all these guys kept saying they were going to see their accountant.
Right. After her conviction, Dorothea was somehow able to find work as a nurse's aide for the disabled and the elderly in private homes. Again, no background checks, apparently?
No, it was a different time.
In 1961, Axel had Dorothea committed to DeWitt State Hospital after a pattern of binge drinking, lying, criminal behavior, and several suicide attempts. While in the hospital, doctors diagnosed her as a pathological liar with an unstable personality. Axel and Dorothea divorced in 1966, although she would continue using the surname Johansson for some time after. I think I said Johnson. I apologize. I'm going to go back and correct. His name is Axel Johansson. Forgive me. I'm not actually going back. I'm just telling you.
We're verbally going back.
Yes. She began using the name Sharon Johansson and pretending to be a kind Christian woman, all while hiding her past. She also presented herself as a caregiver, which we know she's not maternal. She's not a caregiver. Mm-mm. So she pretends to be a caregiver, and she provides young women with a sanctuary from poverty and abuse without a fee. Seems like maybe she's, she's turned a leaf. She's coming around the corner.
Yeah. This is the do-gooder part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Dorothea didn't wait long before finding love again. She married Roberto Jose Puente, 19 years her junior, in 1966. I think some people might be piecing this together now. Mm-hmm. The couple didn't last long. They separated after 16 months. Dorothea stated that there was domestic abuse, and that was the main reason for their separation. In 1967, she tried to serve Roberto with divorce papers, but he up and bounced out to Mexico. Ooh. He's like, holler.
You can't divorce me. I'm leaving.
Catch, like the movie, Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
So the pair's relationship remained volatile, with Dorothea filing a restraining order in 1975. 2 years after they divorced in 1973. Dorothea, just like she had the last time, would continue using the surname Puente. After her divorce from Roberto, Dorothea would concentrate on running a boarding house at 21st and F Streets. The address was 1426 F Street in Sacramento. She began to entrench herself in the community. She became the resource, the go-to for aid for alcoholics, the homeless, mentally ill. She would even hold AA meetings, and she would even assist people in signing up for Social Security benefits. Again, seems like, okay, maybe she turned the corner and she's doing good. She worked, and she changed her persona into a respected matronly type. She even began wearing vintage clothing and oversized granny glasses, and she let her hair go gray.
So basically, she turned into the lady that owns Tweety.
Yes, basically, yes. I mean, because who doesn't trust a grandma? Seriously, you're like, oh, look at the grandma. I mean, everybody loves a grandma.
It was always Sylvester that was up to stuff.
She also ingrained herself into Sacramento's Hispanic Latin community by funding charities, scholarships, and radio programs. So Dorothea would marry again at the age of 47. This is husband number 4, Pedro Angel Montalvo. They marry in 1976. Pedro, an abusive alcoholic, left Dorothea shortly after they wed. And when I say shortly, I mean shortly. It was a couple of weeks. That same year, Dorothea began going to bars and picking up men. Mind you, she's still presenting herself to the community as this matronly grandma. But she's going at 47, by the way. And
hey, love knows no age.
I'm saying presenting herself as this grandma at 47.
Oh, that's young to be a grandma. I gotcha.
So she begins going to bars, and she'd pick up men, and then she would get them to trust her, and she would steal their benefit checks. She'd forge their signature and cash them. So in 1978, this catches up with her. She's caught, and she's charged and convicted of illegally cashing 34 state and federal checks.
Dang.
Her game was strong, okay?
Yeah. That's a lot of checks.
Yeah. I'd be too nervous to do one.
34 benefit checks, but that doesn't mean that there were 34 unique checks.
No, but even
Yeah.
still, that's a lot of checks. Like,
that's a lot of checks. They only come once a month. That's 34 months. That's almost 3 years worth of checks, even if it was like all in 1 year. That's still...
seriously, that's some serious cash. So she's caught and convicted, and she's given 5 years probation in order to pay back $4,000 in restitution. Guess how she gets that $4,000?
Somebody else's benefit check?
Yeah. She's stealing more checks. So I guess there comes a point where fraud and brothel running, not quite enough of a thrill anymore. So she escalates. Mm-hmm. In April of 1982, 61-year-old Ruth Monroe, who was Dorothea's friend and business partner in a catering business, rents a space in Dorothea's upstairs apartment. Not long after that, Ruth apparently has an overdose of codeine and acetaminophen.
It's a weird combo.
Dorothea tells police that Ruth was depressed over her husband's terminal illness. The police, of course, believe this matronly grandma type with her oversized granny glasses and her gray hair. So, of course, Ruth's death is ruled a suicide. A few weeks pass and police return to F Street after 74-year-old Malcolm McKenzie accused Dorothea of drugging and stealing from him. On August 18th of 1982, Dorothea is convicted on 3 theft charges, and she's sentenced to 5 years in prison. So finally, this chick goes to prison, okay?
Yeah, finally gets caught for something.
So while incarcerated, I mean, just because she goes to prison doesn't mean she loses the game, okay? Because while she's incarcerated, she starts to receive letters from Everson Gilmouth, a 77-year-old retiree from Oregon. The two begin corresponding quite frequently. So when Dorothea is released from prison in 1985, after serving 3 of her 5 years, guess who meets her to pick her up? Yeah, 77 now, 9, Everson meets Dorothea and picks her up driving a red 1980 Ford pickup truck. Their relationship grows quick, and the couple plan a wedding and even open a joint bank account.
Yeah, that's quick.
In November of 1985, Dorothea hired a handyman named Ismael Flores to install wood paneling in her apartment. Dorothea gave him $800 for his labor, and she gave him Everson's red pickup truck, stating that her boyfriend no longer needed it. She says the reason that he didn't need it was because he was in Los Angeles, because who drives in Los Angeles, right? I mean, not like they have gridlock traffic there because of all the traffic and cars, but you know, who drives in LA?
It's a city famous for its walkability.
Right. Yeah. I'm thinking something a bit more nefarious, but we shall see. So Dorothea hires Ismael for another job. She asks him to build a 6 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot box. Yeah. She says she plans to use it to store books and, quote, other items in it. Dorothea's jobs for Ismael not quite done just yet. She then asks him to help transport this 6 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot box that's sealed now to a storage depot. Ismael, sure, okay. You know, sweet Ismael. He doesn't think anything of it. Well, while en route to the storage depot, Dorothea tells Ismael to stop and pull over. They're on a Garden Highway in Sutter County, California. Instead of going to the depot, she says, just drop this junk on the riverbank.
Okay.
So this spot actually had become an unofficial dump site for household items. Mind you, she had him build this case because she wanted to hold books, but now it's junk. Something.
Doesn't say much for his craftsmanship.
Something's just not sitting quite right here, Dorothea. On January 1st of 1986, two fishermen spot the box and call the police. Well, not surprisingly, true crime podcast and all, and the fact that Dorothea is an evil wench, police find inside the box the body of Everson Gilmouth. So, guess he wasn't in LA?
No, not in LA. But he didn't need his car anymore.
That's true. He didn't. Initially, because of the state of decomposition, they were unable to identify Everson's body. Dorothea continues to collect Everson's pension and even wrote letters to his family. In those letters, she stated that he'd not been in contact with them himself because he was ill. I'm sorry, but here's my thing, and maybe this is because I've seen too many documentaries and movies and listened to too many podcasts and done an episode or two of our own. If somebody is ever writing for a family member or a friend and they're like, oh, they can't contact you because they're sick. Nah, nope, no, I don't believe it.
I mean, nowadays it'd be like, would you even know? Because they could just be texting.
Yeah, but I'm going to be like, jump on Zoom. I need to see them. FaceTime me. Yeah. They might be asleep. That's fine. Nudge them. Let me know. Let me make sure they're breathing.
Yeah. Sure.
Hold the phone under them so I can see it fog up.
I'm going to need proof of life on this Zoom call.
No, I need you to hold up a newspaper from today. I need to make sure this is recent.
Yeah.
So Everson's body wouldn't actually be identified for another few years, not until 1988. So Dorothea continues to run the boarding house, taking in 40 new tenants. Yeah, 40. Her tenants were mostly elderly and disabled. She was really popular with the local social workers because she would take in the, quote, tough cases, including addicts and abusive tenants. She would collect the tenants' mail before they had a chance to get to it, and she would keep their social security checks. She would then pay the tenants out stipends and keep the rest for expenses, as she said.
Yeah, taking her cut.
Mm-hmm. She was getting more than $5,000 each month. In February of 1987, Lena Carpenter, who was 78 years old, was placed in Dorothea's care. Lena, never seen again. In July of 1987, James Gallup, who was 62, was also placed in Dorothea's care, and he too was never seen again. But nobody's catching on. Nobody is catching on.
Yeah, they're all like, oh, well, I'm sure these old people will turn up eventually. Or it just goes to show that people were just trying to get rid of
their elderly
people.
Yeah. So in October of 1987, 62-year-old Vera Martin is placed in Dorothea's care. She exposes Dorothea, and the story ends, and we're done. Oh. That's the end of the B-side. No, I'm just kidding.
Almost as anticlimactic as Max Payne.
No, not kidding. Not really. Nice. Again, she's never seen again. Finally, people start getting suspicious when a homeless alcoholic man known as Chief, that Dorothea had used as a handyman, disappeared. He disappears after digging up the basement of Dorothea's apartment and hauling away the soil. The basement floor was then covered with a concrete slab. Dorothea also had Chief dig up her backyard. A concrete slab appeared shortly after his disappearance. And also in 1988, Brenda Trujillo, who had been in prison with Dorothea, lived in her building and complained to police that Dorothea had drugged her and tried to cash her checks. In February of 1988, Bert Montoya, who was 52, moved into Dorothea's building. Well, Albert, his real name, Bert, was developmentally disabled with schizophrenia. Remember, social workers loved her because she would take the, quote, tough cases. So Dorothea, as with the others, took over Bert's affairs. In November of 1988, Bert's social worker Judy Moyes, filed a missing persons report after he failed to show for meetings, which was extremely unlike him. Police go to Dorothea's to check on him and were given a note that he had left. They returned later with a search warrant after noticing some soil that had been disrupted on the property. With that search warrant, they find, you remember the case of the case we did a couple weeks ago where they don't find anything? The police, they completely botched the job and they don't find, I'm just kidding. They do. They actually find stuff this time. They discover 7 bodies. The bodies of Leona Carpenter, Bert Montoya, Betty Palmer. Betty's head and hands and lower limbs were missing.
Oh.
Of course, this kicked off an investigation, and Dorothea, not even a suspect initially.
How did all these bodies get in my yard? That's so weird.
I don't know, officer, where they all came from. So
these darn people putting bodies in my yard.
Buried themselves in my yard. I don't know. I'm just a sweet grandma.
I don't really go in the back much.
So police even allow her to leave the property to go, buy a cup of coffee. She leaves to buy this cup of coffee. She flees the area and she goes to Los Angeles, where she ends up at a bar and begins talking to an elderly pensioner as Donna Johnson. This man that she began talking to, his name Charles Wilgraves, and he recognizes Dorothea from the news. So Charles is pretty sly because without her even noticing, he keeps her talking, he engages with her, and without her knowing, he notifies police and CBS. He's like, oh, no, we're gonna make sure everybody knows. So police and CBS are notified. She's apprehended. She's arraigned without bail. In June of 1990, Dorothea was charged with a total of 9 murders. Everson Gilmouth, who once identified, his autopsy results found traces of fluazepam, which is a sedative. They found that in his system. Ruth Monroe, Lena Carpenter, Alberto Montoya, Dorothy Miller, who was 64, Benjamin Fink, 55, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, who was 64, and Betty Palmer. According to police reports, most of her victims had died by overdose. Dorothea then wrapped them in bed sheets and plastic lining and buried them in the backyard. It was also discovered that Dorothea had cashed over 60 Social Security checks of her tenants after their deaths, and multiple fluazepam prescriptions were found in her house. Preliminary hearings began in April of 1990. A change of venue motion was filed by Dorothea's attorney, Kevin Climo, and Peter Vlotten III. And it was actually granted with a judge moving it to Monterey County. Trial begins February of 1993, and it went into July. Jurors then deliberated for 24 days.
Dang.
Before passing a note to the judge saying they were deadlocked. The judge told them to try again. They go back, they try again, and they find Dorothea guilty of 3 counts of murder. They remain deadlocked on 6 counts. Judge Michael Verga was the judge. During the trial, over 130 witnesses were called by prosecutor John O'Mara. I mentioned the judge. Judge Michael Verga declares a mistrial on the 6 counts. Dorothea is convicted and sentenced to life without parole. She was incarcerated at Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla, California. She died in prison at the age of 82. All the way until her death, she maintained that she was innocent, stating that they all died from natural causes. Yeah, you naturally overdosing them.
Yeah, and then I didn't want anyone to, worry, so I just buried them under concrete in my backyard.
Right. I mean, come on, lady. Dorothea has been featured on multiple true crime shows, including Deadly Women, A Stranger in My Home, Crime Stories, and World's Most Evil Killers. The film Evil Spirits from 1991 is loosely based on Dorothea. It stars Karen Black and Art Johnson. In 1998, Dorothea began a correspondence relationship with Shane Bugbee. The end result, Cooking with a Serial Killer. It contained a lengthy interview and a large amount of recipes and various pieces of prisoner art sent to Shane by Dorothea.
That's messed up.
Jodi Picoult references Dorothea's crime and cookbook in her book, House Rules. And if you would like to, you can see the home at 1426 F Street. It's part of a tour held by the Sacramento Old City Association. In 2015, the Ghost Adventures crew investigated the house based on reports of hauntings by the victims and Dorothea. Now, Adam, you remember we've talked about Quibi quite a few times, which is now owned by Roku.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I mentioned this show quite a while ago. There was a show on Quibi called Murder House Flip.
Okay.
In April of 2020, Quibi featured Dorothea's 1426 F Street home. It's actually the very first episode of the series. It was purchased by a young couple and renovated. And the renovation was absolutely amazing. But if you have the chance, you should watch the episode because they do talk about the crimes. In June of 2020, the house was featured in a 10-minute documentary, 60-second docs about the purchase and renovation of the house by the current owners. And there you go. And that's the story of, what do they call her? She is known as Death House Landlady, Dorothea Puente.
Death House Landlady. She also had like 5 different last names. So.
Right. Gray, Johansson, Puente, Maltavo. Yeah. There you go. One of the worst people, one of the worst serial killers ever, in my opinion.
What was her? I mean, she was convicted of 3.
Mm-hmm.
What is her suspected total?
9.
9. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeesh. And that's after years of just stealing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? The whole, like, the brothel thing. Yeah. That's one of those where, that's one that people debate because it's like, it's a victimless crime. Both people are there, whatever. But you have to think, if she was taking advantage of people by stealing their checks, she might have been stealing money from people while they were in the brothel, or, whatever.
Absolutely. Who knows?
But yeah, quite the character right there, that Dorothea.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm. But there you go. So that's the B-side. I think I've rendered you speechless.
Yeah, I also was like pausing because I wasn't sure if we needed to have an editing break.
Oh, no, you're good.
Yeah, I've tried to be better about that so we can have easier edits.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that was careful who you rent from.
As I just rent a brand new apartment.
Yeah, but then like renting from a corporation's it's a different danger. But I mean, like when you rent a house and somebody else lives there and you don't know that person very well, that's a dicey proposition because you're not only renting from them, you're kind of becoming roommates in a way, at least housemates,
Yeah.
That's a whole different, ball of wax.
Man, I mean, just the fact that so many people had to go missing before it was even noticed, it's like, gosh.
Well, and she was preying on, unfortunately, people that people were trying to get rid of, or wouldn't be missed. Like you said, like the social workers liked her because she took the difficult cases. Well, the difficult cases probably had less people looking for them.
Yeah.
There was a method to the madness.
It just shows that, hopefully, things have changed. But at that time, It just showed that the elderly and the mentally disabled were not looked after like they should have been.
Yeah, it's not even that long ago. I mean,
I know.
80s, 90s. I mean, I guess it is as kids today would say the late 1900s, but
and you just want to punch him in the face. Shut up,
also,
kid.
Yeah, but then I'm like, yeah, you're right, and it's kind of cool when you say it like that, but also like, oh,
yeah,
yeah.
There you go. So that's another episode of A Side B Side Podcast. Of course, sources, photos will be on our website,
A Side B Side Podcast.square.site.
There you go. You can always head on over to our Instagram. We post over there as well. If you have a story idea, maybe a true crime story or a movie that Adam will absolutely hate and want to rip apart again, or that guy, that girl from that show, let us know. You can hit us up on all the socials, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, email, asidebsidepodcasts@gmail.com. Also, we have a YouTube. You can always check us out on YouTube. And Adam, what about Apple? What do they need to do?
They can just search for us on your iTunes app, A Side B Side Podcast, and you can like and share and rate us on there. Rating is really important because that pushes up our ranking, and then we can get more listeners and we can all have more friends. And then eventually someday we can have a big convention in like Des Moines.
What? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
There you go. All right.
Or any other. My only request is that when we have a convention, it has to be in a city that has two names, like Des Moines, San Diego, New York.
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, that's going to be my absurd writer request. For Mariah Carey, it was like only blue M&Ms, but I went must be in a city with two
cities
names.
With two names. Two names. All right. All right. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Brooke.